Welcome to RGES World Literature. This is Lesson 20, Grammar. Now recall that you're going to have 3 tapes each week. They will all be read. RGES World Literature, Lesson 20. The first one will be Grammar, then French Literature, then Count of Monte Cristo, at least for the next several weeks, and then we'll move to the next work of literature. So don't forget that you do need to take notes on this stuff, and these notes need to go into your notebook in the divided into 3 sections: grammar, French literature, and the story itself that we're studying. Now today we're going to talk about exclamation points. This is considered a complete English grammar rules book, and so I'm going to be reading these because it covers a lot of little details that mostly we do not come across, but there's still, I want to give you a definitive instruction in grammar. The definition: an exclamation point or an exclamation mark is a punctuation mark commonly used to express strong, intense emotions in declarations. It can also be used to add emphasis to interjections and commands. Examples of ending exclamatory sentences with an exclamation point. They're most often used in place of periods to end declarative sentences that express very strong emotions such as anger, excitement, surprise, or disgust. They're sometimes referred to as exclamatory sentences. Examples might be, quote, "I can't wait to travel to Paris next week," exclamation point, quote. Another example, quote, "I can't believe I got into law school," exclamation point, quote. 3, "We are all so excited for your visit," exclamation point, quote. And 4, "I'm so sick of all the negativity in this office," exclamation point, quote. So let me go ahead and write one of those as an example. We always notice the exclamation point within the quote in these, when the whole thing is a quote, when the whole sentence or the declarative sentence is a quote. So let me write an example of that. And you'll notice in this example, I went ahead and put the punctuation marks that I want you to pay attention to here in red. Now, we can also use it, an exclamation point, to add emphasis in an interjection. Okay, so this was our first example up here. Used to express strong, intense emotions in declarations or declarative sentences. 2, to add emphasis with interjections. An interjection, which is also known as an exclamation, is a word, phrase, or sound used to convey an emotion such as surprise, excitement, happiness, or anger. Interjections are grammatically unrelated to any other part of a sentence. Because they are able to stand alone as what we call minor sentences, they can be punctuated with a period, an exclamation point, or a question mark. An example of an exclamation would be hooray, or yuck, or congratulations, or ah. Lots of different interjections. They stand alone is the key to the idea of an interjection. They stand alone, and they don't operate with any other part of speech. It's a standalone phrase or word. Hooray. Whoops, I'm spelling it quickly. Yuck. Things like that. Okay? Now I would not expect these kinds of words to be used in analytical formal writing. Okay, so this would be more like in creative writing. But we can use an exclamation point And notice it stands alone as its own sentence. Here's an example of one in quotes. Yuck, I hate coconuts. There's my quote. They're saying the whole thing. This is what we call a minor sentence all by itself, ending in an exclamation point. This is also the next sentence, is also a part of the quote. And I also want to emphasize the emotion, so I'm going to put a second exclamation point with a quote. So this part is an example of number 1 above, a declarative sentence expressing strong emotion. This is the example of the interjection at the beginning. Now, another thing we can use it for is to add emphasis to imperative sentences. Remember, an imperative sentence is a command. Imperative sentences are direct commands or requests. They are formed by using the base form of a verb, the infinitive, without the participle, without the particle to. So we're not saying to build, we just say build. And committing this and omitting the subject of the sentence. So I would say, you build the boat would be declarative, but I would say build the boat without the subject, and the subject is implied, the person I am talking to, you. Okay, so I could say, if I want to add emphasis, okay, I could use an exclamation point, like get out of here now, or go to your room this instant. Now those 3 ideas to use with a declarative sentence or with an imperative sentence or with an interjection are probably the most common ways to use an exclamation point. Now there are 2 others I'm going to show you that are definitely not used in formal writing or academic writing or professional writing, but can be used in letters, and I'm not even sure I would use these that much in at least this first example, even in creative writing, but let me illustrate it for you. It's where you can use an exclamation point in parentheses to emphasize one particular part of a sentence. An example would be, it was nearly 4 a.m. exclamation point before we left the office. So far he has won 10 Olympic gold medals throughout his career. I think I'm getting a car for my birthday. So rather than just having the exclamation point at the end of the sentence, I think I'm getting a car for my birthday, would be the normal way I'd say it. But if I really want to emphasize the word car, of all the things I could get for my birthday, I'm getting a car, then I would write it, or I can write it this way. Another more unusual usage is when we use exclamation points with onomatopoeia. Now, onomatopoeia is where we have a word that sounds like, that's supposed to represent a sound, like whir, or meow, or creak. And we're trying to represent a sound with a word. So let me give you an example of how that would look. Creak went the rusty old gate as we pushed our way into the yard. And what's unusual, you should notice here in this example, is that this is not capitalized. Okay, so we have our exclamation point within the sentence there. Rather unusual, these 2 examples. Now another idea, using exclamation points with other punctuation, we have with periods. We might have a period and then an exclamation point, for instance, with abbreviations. An exclamation point replaces a period when it ends a sentence. However, if a period is used to mark an abbreviation that appears at the end of an exclamatory sentence, we put the exclamation point outside to the right of the period with no space between them. Here's an example. I can't believe your grandfather worked with Martin Luther King Jr. And the thing to notice here, of course, is the order. We have, first off, you always have a comma before junior. I don't know if you know that, but we haven't talked about that yet. And then we have the period for the end of the abbreviation and the exclamation point for the end of the sentence. We're going on vacation until the end of Aug, abbreviated for August, and then so we'd have a UG, period, exclamation point. Let's look at using it with quotation marks. We've been illustrating that quite a lot here, but we use quotation marks to indicate the exact words used by someone else. This is known as direct speech or direct quotation. When the quoted text is itself a complete exclamatory sentence, the exclamation point will appear within the quotation marks. All our examples on this page have been of that variety. He exclaimed, comma, quote, "I've never stolen anything in my entire life," exclamation point, quote. "Oh, comma, give me a break," exclamation point, quote, she shouted angrily. So I'll give you an example of that in a minute. I'll write it down. But this next example is also with quotation marks. However, if the quoted text is a part of a larger exclamatory sentence, then the exclamation point will fall outside of the quotation marks. So let me give you, read two examples of this. "I can't believe he seriously wants to," quote, "join the circus." "Don't tell me to," quote, "calm down." Now let me show you how those would be written. So with quotation marks and exclamation points, in the first one, we have a part of the sentence quoted. He exclaimed, comma, quote. Okay. "I've never stolen anything in my entire life." Now we want to add our emphasis or our emphaticness to the entire sentence, so we're going to put at the end of that the exclamation point and then end the quote. However, if I just want to pick up a phrase and quote that phrase rather than the whole sentence, "Don't tell me to calm down." Okay, this is the phrase I want to quote. Notice my quotes are just around the phrase. I don't have a comma before it, as I did here when I'm doing a whole sentence. And I do not start it with a capital letter, where I always do if I'm quoting the sentence. Even if I'm leaving out a little part and I have an ellipsis at the beginning, I will always have a capital. Well, that's not true. I don't have a capital there. But I could start the quote and the ellipsis, and if I'm quoting the rest of the sentence, it would look like this model. But if I'm only quoting a phrase, no comma ahead of time, just the quote, no capital letter, and then the end quote before the exclamation point, which refers to the whole sentence. Okay. Now we can also say that sometimes, and you'll see it often in text or emails, with informal writing, we sometimes use a question mark with an exclamation point together to emphasize surprise or excitement about the question we are asking. Generally speaking, the exclamation point comes after the question mark. If the writer wants to add even more emphasis, the question mark / exclamation point combination can be repeated. For instance, I could say, "What did you say to him?" Question mark, exclamation point. Or I could say, "You won the lottery?" Question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point. And so in this example, I would think of this as a question mark, exclamation point combination. and I know that most of you have seen this, and again, only for informal writing. Again, they reiterate that point. They say, however, this construction is very informal and it should be reserved for casual communication between friends. Do not use an exclamation point after a question mark in formal, professional, or academic writing. If you are asking a question, no matter how excited or emphatic, simply use a question mark on its own. Sometimes we will also use multiple exclamation points. Similar to using an exclamation point with a question mark to add emphasis to a question, it is also common in informal conversational writing to use multiple exclamation points to add extra intensity to an exclamatory sentence. Generally speaking, the more exclamation points used, the greater the intensity of the sentence. For example, my mom screamed, comma, "Go to your room this instant," 2 exclamation points, and the end of quote. I can't believe I failed my test again, 3 exclamation points. You get the idea. And I know you've all seen that. That, again, is informal writing only. The last point that they have about exclamations is that if the title, let's say you have a title of a book that has an exclamation point in it, like How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the title of the book would be italicized, and so would the exclamation point. If you are having the title of the book Absalom, and there is an exclamation point in that title at the end, and let's say you are handwriting it and you're not putting it in italics, but you're underlining it to indicate the title of a book, you would also underline the exclamation point. I think that's pretty clear. If the title, so this is the last point, use it with titles. Okay. Whatever, if the exclamation is part of the title, then you will use the same formatting. And the opposite also holds true. If the exclamation point is part of your sentence, but not part of the title, then do not use the same formatting as the title. I can't wait until the first time my daughter reads The Wind in the Willows. Exclamation point, The Wind in the Willows, italicized, exclamation point, not italicized. Okay, so that's the end of this instruction. Next time we'll talk about question marks. Do make sure you review your last section's notes. Put this in the notebook with your other grammar notes. And we will see you shortly.